Okay, so the format here, I should have told you this before. We're not taking a break now. We're going right with our next keynote presenter, who is Jeff Vincent. Jeff is a non-family CEO of 19 years of one of the oldest family businesses in the United States, the Laird Norton Company. And this is a remarkable story, very different than Kohler. But the highlight of this is there are over 500 owners of this family. So fasten your seatbelts. Think of more great questions. And I now want to bring Jeff Vincent and Julie Lilly up to the podium. Jeff's going to talk about his business a bit with Julie. Julie is my partner at the St. Louis Trust Company, a multifamily office, and we don't really compete with Jeff's business because it's way out on the West Coast, but he's got a heck of a family office too. So Jeff, Vincent, welcome. Julie, thank you. And we are going to take a break when they're done for our final panel, which will be after this, of course.
Well, good morning. Good morning.
Well, we don't want to talk about the Packers. I was up for the Seahawks-Packers game about 2 weeks ago, and it was a very humbling experience. But it is a great organization. It was great to be in Green Bay and staying at the Kohler Lodge. As Spencer mentioned, I flew in from Seattle yesterday, and I did that because I think I really believe in the importance of family business in our economy and in our society. And I've dedicated 30 years of my career in being in two different family businesses. One, a second-generation family business, and one that's now a seventh-generation family business. And I'm here to kind of just share a little bit of our history and some of our lessons learned. Each of your family business is unique and will evolve in its own way. There are some best practices or things we think are best practices, but there are also a lot of lessons learned and a lot of bumps in the road that we can share with each other and maybe help avoid as we move forward. So I'm here to just kind of talk a little bit about where we've come from. I've been there with the Laird Norton Company, as Spencer said, 19 years. Actually, this is my anniversary of my start date with Laird Norton Company as CEO 19 years ago. I actually came from Chicago, where I was with another family business, and moved my family out there. So that's just a little bit of background about me. We really view the Laird Norton company as a Laird Norton enterprise. And if really what that means is about bringing business, philanthropy, and family together and really working together to have the biggest impact that we can in the areas that we're involved in. So you'll hear me talk a lot about being an enterprise. And it's because part of it's how we've evolved over the 165 years. Our evolution has been very different than Kohler's. We've been in a variety of different businesses over 165 years. In fact, we started out logging and milling operations in Winona, Minnesota. We were, as we like to now think about, harvesting white pine in Wisconsin and Minnesota started in 1855 and then for the next 50 years. And floating the logs down the Mississippi River and milling them in Winona and providing lumber for the growing Midwest. And then what happens is the white pine were all harvested. And so the family kind of thinks about that and said, what do we do next? So they actually got involved with some other Minnesota families and moved to the Northwest and actually started the Northwest timber industry. So if you think of, we were part of the founders of Weyerhaeuser, Boise Cascade, and Potlatch, which served as the foundation for the timber industry out there. Now, we were there involved primarily as investors. We sat on the boards of directors. The family members sat on board of directors of those companies and at times provided leadership as the CEO of Weyerhaeuser and other things. But it was a very different period. So that period went from basically about 1900 to about the 100-year anniversary in 1955, when those companies were going public and the family was really starting to think about where do we go next. And they really said, they went up to Alaska on a cruise, brought all the family together and said, what are we going to do, right? Our run as being an investor in the Northwest timber industry is changing. The companies have gone public. Where do we go next? And so they made a decision to get back to becoming a business-owning family. So no, they no longer have any ties to what they originally started out doing, but really starting to think about where do we go. And so they started actually investing in businesses and starting to move from there. So the next 50 years really was about, they got back closer to the timber industry. They built the nation's third largest building materials company during that period of time, formed the foundation, what was then a family office called the Laird Norton Trust Company, which has now become the Laird Norton Wealth Management. And that really was the next 50 years. I came along in 2001, and my job was to really kind of think about where the company was at that point. My charge was to come in and try to figure out how to restart growth and value, and also think about continuity for the long term. And so then we went actually through a period of restructuring, a lot of restructuring in 2001, reinvesting back into the building materials business, growing that. But then we actually sold that business in 2006, which then really started a whole new period for us, because that was basically 80% of the business. And so today we're a much different company, where we are a real estate company. We built an operating business, a real estate operating business, where we're into commercial office and industrial, and now we're starting to develop workforce housing and student housing in the Northwest. We're the largest privately held wealth management firm in the Seattle area, and we're also starting to do direct investments in various operating businesses as we move forward and try to bring our values to those businesses. So that's kind of how we've evolved. So kind of four very different periods of time over that 165 years. Now let's talk a little bit about the family. We are, you think about it, this is actually our family tree. So you see the rings of the tree, right? So it all starts right here. Started with 2 brothers and a cousin. Actually, there were more that were part of the original founding, but they couldn't handle the Minnesota winters, and they went back to Pennsylvania. So we don't talk about them. It's about the ones that actually were there, the 2 brothers and cousins that started this whole thing. And so this just gives you a sense of how we've grown, and grown actually into 45 different branches. So started off with those 3, and really have 45 different branches within the family today. So here's the family, okay? Almost 500 members, right? And they break out along 4 generations. Now, the 4th generation was much larger when I started 19 years ago, but today, 4th generation is about 4%. The 5th generation, which has been the governing generation for the last couple of decades, is 30%. The 6th generation, which is now the majority, is 44%. And now you actually have the 7th generation, which wasn't even around when I started, is now 22% of the company's membership. And we're actually in a generational shift right now. When I came in, the 4th generation was just starting to phase out, was ending their phasing out period of governing the business. We're in a 5th generation, and now we're in that process of shifting from 5th to 6th. People who are on the board of directors and other things. Our management team has 3 primary goals: create value, grow value, ensure enterprise continuity. How do we keep this 7th generation family going for the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th generation? And how do we bring the family's values in around our culture and how we do things every day? This is our board. We have a 12-member board. 7 of the board members are family members. 5 of them are non-family members. I'm one of those. We did not have outside directors, non-family directors, till I came on the board in 2001, and then we added additional board members at that time that were from the outside, and they've made a huge difference in what we do within the company. Family Council Committee. We're different than a lot of family businesses in regards to this. A Family Council Committee is actually a committee of the board. A lot of times in family business, what is viewed as best practice is the family council sits outside of the business. We think, and again, this is how families evolve differently. We believe the messiness of the family has to come into the boardroom because it's hard to how do you actually deal with it out here? That we actually, at our board meetings, we spend time on family issues. Now, it's not the majority of what we spend our time on, but it is something we deal with. Okay, so keys to longevity. And this is my personal perspective on why the Laird Norton Company, Laird Norton Enterprises, survived 165 years. So this has been having become a student of the family and what's made us successful. First thing that as I mentioned to you, this has always been about family and business. It's always been about family and business. It started out as a family business partnership. Think about it, 2 brothers and a cousin. That's how it started. So you always had to deal with the partnership issues. You had to deal with the family issues. And the other interesting thing is, by the second generation, and going into the third, there were no male heirs. Their male heirs were done by the third generation. There is not a person associated with a family that has Norton or Laird as their last name. None. Now you have some that have Laird as a first name. They'll have Winona from Winona, Minnesota as their first name. You'll have a variety of different combinations, but there's not a Laird or a Norton. And I think I give the women a lot of credit in that second generation who did a couple things. One, they put the importance on family. It was not only about business, it was also about family. And you had to bring those things together. The second thing is, it was about inclusion from that, because you all of a sudden, where they were getting the talent and stuff like that, they were embracing outsiders into their family. And they were starting by the third generation to be what we called the married ins, were providing the leadership often within the family business. So I give family, this idea of partnership and family and business being a really key factor in longevity. 2 is as I mentioned, we've had to adapt and change. We really have evolved over that 165 years, as I mentioned earlier, as you saw how we started out in timber into what we are in today. As I said, with the women leadership that we had in the second generation, we are very inclusive and involved. So we have 64 family members who are very involved in a lot of different activities every year in the family business, not in the business, I think, but around family and business activities. We have 6 non-descendants in key positions, 6 married ins, and that's about half of the, I would say, key leadership positions that are family focused are for married ins. And then we actually, as you saw from that big picture of the family, we have about 300, usually anywhere from 285 to 325 people that show up every year at our annual meeting, which lasts 3.5 days, which is both about family and business again, they get together. And that's part of the key of the continuity. This is one that I've had, as I've been in family business, one that I had to really get my mind around. It's kind of what I call the governance calculations, because you're always trying to think about, going back to this, how are you creating value within the business? How are you making sure that this thing is going to last from a continuity standpoint? And how are you meeting the individual needs of your shareholders? And you're constantly trying to think about that, and cash is always one of the limiting factors. But that is what we as a board really think about on a consistent basis, and sometimes you emphasize the business a little bit more. Sometimes you might be in a period where you need to emphasize the family or an individual shareholder needs, as we did in 2006. But the key, and why we always put this right in the middle, this is the board of directors and the leadership team, because at the end of the day, it's about trust, which allows you to lead. And it's always around and that's what's going to get people comfortable within the family, that you're doing the right thing around this matrix, is that you got the trust that allows you to lead them through that. And my last point, before I'll do a just really quick video clip, is remaining relevant. And this is one what I'm focusing more and more of my time on as I'm ending my career. I know my exact retirement date. I'm retiring on October 15th. 2023. We spent a lot of time talking about transitions within the company and how we're going to be going through that. But when you think about it, when you start out in a family business, I think the Kohler part is an amazing story, is that when you start thinking about first and second generation, it's very much about the tangible things associated with the business. It's about the money that's being generated. It's about the positions of authority. It's about the jobs that are being created for family members. But by the time you kind of get out on the continuum of into that seventh and eighth generation and wealth has been dispersed and you've had various liquidity events, and how the intangible part becomes almost as important, if not sometimes for some family members more important, which is getting into that. What does the brand stand for? What is that sense of pride? Why do we want to be associated with this? Right? Not just about the money part, but why do we want to come together as a group? It's about personal growth. How do I grow professionally, personally through this? And also this sense of belonging, this community of cousins. That's because, really think about it, 500 people. You're not getting together with them at Thanksgiving dinner. You might get in a small subgroup, but it's about when you come together, how do you, throughout the year in those annual meetings, how do you create that sense of community where you feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself? This is something unique that sometimes people miss in our society. I'm just going to end with this, and then we'll go into Q&A. This will only take a couple minutes. To our partners and employees, the Laird Norton name is associated with competence, integrity, resilience, reliability, and a long-term perspective. To almost 500 family members, the Laird Norton name serves as a proud connection to a seventh-generation family enterprise that represents their history and a dedicated sense of community. To the Pacific Northwest, the Laird Norton name represents a company that has a long and proud history in the communities in which we work and live. Since 2006, Laird Norton Properties has grown from 260 industrial properties into holdings valued at more than $500 million in cities and towns west of the Mississippi. It is a vibrant business that continues to look forward, building new opportunities and partnerships that will create value for all stakeholders. The Laird Norton name is also proudly associated with Laird Norton Wealth Management. It has grown over the last 5 decades to become the largest independent wealth advisory firm in the Puget Sound region. Our recent business investments, such as Zevia and Weizerk, focus on natural, innovative, and sustainable products and services that align with our company's values. Within the broader Seattle community, the Laird Norton name reminds our neighbors of our charitable giving, our active local involvement, and our passion to serve. We have partnered with organizations such as Mary's Place, Stolen Youth, Partnership for Learning, Pianos in the Park, and most recently created a Laird Norton Scholarship Fund to meet educational needs of young people struggling to overcome poverty and adversity. Since our founding in 1855, we have created a sense of pride and a compelling sense of community associated with the Laird Norton name. We will continue to hold true to this legacy in the years ahead. Together, as family, employees, and partners, we are committed to building an even stronger enterprise for the next generations, while sustaining a recognizable Laird Norton brand that continues to represent the company's timeless values.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for that terrific overview of Laird Norton and the Laird Norton family. So we will build on the lessons we learned from David and the Kohler family from a person with a very different perspective, as you've heard. So Jeff is not a member of the Laird Norton family. His company has about 500 employees, and while from my seat, leading a company with about 50, that sounds like a whole lot, it is not 38,000. And we're, I think, all a little blown away by this staggering number of 500 family members,
right,
with about 400 shareholders.
Right.
Correct. So So let's go back in time.
Okay.
19 years ago, you started
Right.
as the first non-family member CEO of Laird Norton.
I was young.
Of course you were. You're still young. So what led the family to go outside their ranks to bring in a person like you at that moment in the 145 years into the company's history?
I think at that point in time, it kind of goes like what David said. I mean, there had been family leadership that was ready and available, and I think the families, as they we do a strategic, get the family together and get the business together, and we think out longer term, do that about every decade. I think the family recognized that they did not have the person coming up within the family that they saw leading us, at least into that for the next period of time. And their big message to me when they were recruiting me, I was in a family business in Chicago when Heidrick and Struggles found me there. They really wanted somebody that was going to help them kind of rethink about how the business needed to be restructured differently. How do we get kind of value growth going again? But more important, also just as important, how do we actually think about building this business in a way that we have a shot at being a 10th generation or 11th generation family business? And family takes a lot of pride in that. So I took the leap of faith.
Well, it has to be difficult, especially in those early days, as a non-family member to leverage the family enterprise. We heard David's perspective on how he has done that. What's different about the way you leverage the family to strategically to support the enterprise? What are the advantages of being a non-family member, and what are the challenges?
Well, I'll tell you some of the mistakes I made early on. I was brought in to kind of reorganize the company, kind of get it back on track. Board of directors was all for that. I did put the family through a lot of change through that period of time. They had never had somebody like me from the outside, and so there's different compensation programs and all these types of things. And so there was a honeymoon period of about a year and a half, and then there was really kind of 2 years of not really fun times, but I had a board of directors that were really very focused on what was best for the family for the long term, and so we weathered that storm. And we actually got the family to talking in different ways. What I learned from that is that I thought I'd come into this family business, all I had to do was think through the strategy and execution, and we had a family president, that they were going to take care of all the soft stuff with the family members. And what I learned through that period of time is that I really had to get engaged with the family. I had to go out and have those individual meetings with family members in their living rooms, at their kitchen tables, to really understand what their hopes and dreams were for the business, and then actually help them understand what we were trying to do was to meet those hopes and dreams. And so we came out of that, and now the benefits of that is we've got a family, there's always periods of time where you might have some dissent or some things like that, but really we have a pretty unified family today, and it allows you to think more long-term, and how do you really, as David said, how do you actually think about, how do you build a family enterprise that has 500 people today, probably is going to have 700-800 people in 20, 30, 40 years, and actually still be financially relevant to them, but also emotionally relevant to them, so they want to stay together as a community.
So let's, just building on that a little bit more, you talked about how some of those challenges and how you brought the family together. Do you think sitting as outside of the family has helped in any way?
Oh yeah. I think I can remain more objective. I think it's very different when you are within the family and you're going home and having Thanksgiving, as I said last night, having Thanksgiving dinner, or you're getting together at various events, and people remember you when you were 5 years old or 10 years old, and what some mistakes you made, or their family snubbed me at this, you can avoid necessarily getting pulled in some of that family history, and yeah, people will try to pull you into different spheres of influence. But you can remain objective. You can actually focus on speaking the truth. And with, like I said last night, but truth with caring. And so people know that when you're really talking to, when you're saying this, is that you're coming from a place of honesty and caring. And what you're really trying to do is what's in everyone's best interest as a collective group.
So you talked about how the board was comprised only of family members until you arrived on the scene. How did you make that move to add outside directors? And what was the process for bringing that board together?
There was, like I said, the family had gone through a strategic planning process where they said, they made a decision, we're going to go outside, hire our first non-family CEO. We're also going to create a position of the family president. So they kind of split so no longer, used to be the family CEO was also planning out the annual meetings and all the family details. And we've split those two roles, they split the two roles apart. We were a C corporation at that time. We formed ourselves in a limited liability corporation. And part of the whole plan when they made this up is that they were going to move toward having more outside board members. And so they restructured their terms. Some people weren't spending the full terms on the board. So they went through a whole very thoughtful, well planned out process that evolved really from 1999 till 2002.
So I think all of us are curious about how you interact with this incredibly large family, and you shared the family council as part of the board. Will you tell us a little bit more about how that works? What kinds of issues come before the board from the family council?
Oh, it can be everything. So how I interact with the family, it all depends on what the needs are at the time. But the big thing is our annual meeting, what we call the Family Summit, which occurs at the last June of every year. And so there's a lot, it's really a chance for me to present the direction of the business, bring my team up and really talk about where we're going. We spent a lot of time interacting with family members during that period of time. I've been very involved with the next generation that's coming up. We have a next generation event coming up in Boise, Idaho here in 2 months, and I will be speaking to them and really trying to engage the next generation. What does it mean what governance really mean? To making sure that we produce all the kind of things you would typically find in a public company, written differently and with different styles, but we believe very much in transparency. So I have quarterly newsletters that go out about the business. We have our financial summary that really breaks out where value and growth is coming from within the company, to putting out, we're starting to do a lot more with a video communication through our family website. So we're doing a lot of things to try to reach out and give people a sense of who the management team is and what are the things that we're trying to do on a regular basis. The Family Council Committee deals with a lot of different issues that they would bring into the board, such as how do we think about, do we need to be thinking about the buy-sell agreement differently? One of the big issues that's going on, how do we think about philanthropy in the family? And what is the role with the company in relationship to philanthropy? One of the big issues that's going to be on the plate for the family committee, which will come into the board, is that intangible piece that I showed you at the end, is that how do we become more innovative? We got to be innovative on the business side, but how do we become more innovative on the family side so that we can have that sense of belonging, that sense of pride? How do we do that? We were pretty innovative back in the 90s and the early 2000s on some of those things. And we really got to step up our innovation if we're going to really keep that family business partnership together.
Can you share some of your early thoughts on that, what that innovation looks like?
No, we're at the very early stages. I think one of the things I think especially for the younger the sixth gen, is really making sure that their values of sustainability and social responsibility are reflected in the company. So we're spending a lot of time, and the management team spent time here the last year. We've always kind of tried to embed the family's values into the company, but I would say was more driven by selected individuals. We're trying to institutionalize that more. We've developed a new concept of what we call as creating shared value. So it's about the idea that shareholders need to do well financially, but it's also about how do we create shared value for them on the intangible side, as far as personal growth, to how do our employees, what's their shared value in this equation to the communities we're operating in, to how we actually impact the global community. So we're taking some of those concepts, again, which would be very important in that sense of pride, because again, that's what again, it's not only just the wealth that the company represents, but it's also about, what is it, how do I think about this? Am I proud to talk about it?
Right. And philanthropy, plays a role in that.
Yeah.
Describe a little bit of the philosophy there.
Yeah, I mean, it's individual family members had done a lot over the 100 and some years, and with various universities and various things internationally, but had done it kind of within branches, and then had done some things as a group kind of up through the early 2000s, but we've really focused on the last, and this I would give John Ward at the Kellogg Business School a lot of credit for this, really getting the family to focus on and he was one of our board members, so he's, again, the outside influence.
Yeah.
Really thinking about how do we think about philanthropy as a collective whole, to actually provide part of that glue that keeps the family together.
So what about the family actually in the business? With 500 family members, there have to be some pretty tight rules about how family participation in the business works.
We've really not had to deal with that too much because we've gone through these different evolutions. So I'm sure that was a big issue in the first 50 years, right? When they had the milling operation in Winona. But as you think about it, we basically got out of an ongoing operating business starting in 1905. So there, besides sitting on kind of the boards of directors of Weyerhaeuser or Boise Cascade, or on the kind of the family investment company, there really weren't those kind of jobs. And so it really wasn't when we got back into the early 60s were there opportunities for really family members to get engaged in kind of quote jobs in the business, and that never really happened. Because people had kind of gone on and started having the other pursuits. They hadn't grown up with the idea that you're going to be in the family business. So today we only have 2 people in the family business.
Wow.
Two people who get a paycheck. The rest of the family members are involved at the governance level, on board of directors or on key committees and those types of things, but there are only 2 people who actually get a paycheck.
That's amazing. So what about this growing number of shareholders? How do you manage these shareholders, and can the number of shareholders continue to grow and grow as the family grows? That is
we're breaking new ground with 500.
Yeah, I think you are.
And going to 800. It's right now, that's why we're starting to spend even more time on this and figuring this out, is how do you do that? So that's why I think we got to get more innovative on the intangible side, because the business is going to be the business and we're going to grow that in a certain way. But how do we keep all those people connected so that when they show up to a family summit and it's 500 people, they don't feel like, and they're not sitting in a corner, right, with just their immediate family. They're actually engaged with other branches of the family, and they're actually learning from them, and they're actually finding out, wow, there's some good things we can do collectively. One of the more innovative things that the family did back in the 90s, they actually formed something called Camp 3 Tree, which is basically, it's when we get to the summit and you're there for 3.5 days, what are the children going to do, right? And so the children go to camp for 3.5 days and get to know their cousins, right? And that's a reason a lot of times parents show up, because their son or daughter saying, well, I can't miss this. I got to go see cousin Mary or my cousin Frank. And you see that group of kids now are young adults, and they've had some experiences together going all through that process, and actually now being part of the next gen committee and those types of things, it starts forming that trust. And it starts forming those relationships and say, yeah, we want to belong to this. It's, again, about belonging to something bigger than yourself.
That's great. You mentioned the buy-sell agreement earlier. Would you share a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, we did not have a buy-sell agreement until the early 1990s. And the whole idea there was to make sure that the shares stayed within the family. So that was the big thing. And it's actually worked pretty well. When I came on board, even though we put it in place, they weren't really following the rules because nobody wanted to this is where I'm remaining object. Nobody wanted to tell when somebody got a divorce that the spouse could no longer the ex-spouse could no longer kind of participate. And so we'd have a lot of interesting situations at some of our annual meetings and stuff like that because nobody wanted to tell somebody they worked with that, no, I'm going to have to buy back your units. I said, I came in, this is where being objective, right? I just came in and said, this is the contract. I mean, these are the rules. And we got through a couple bumpy times when I actually asked people to leave and that, yes, we'll go through a process of buying back your units. So the buy-sell agreement has worked. It didn't probably work the best during the first 2 years, but the whole idea is kind of keeping the units within the family. And we, like I said, we have family members. We don't distinguish between married-ins and lineal descendants. They're all part of the group.
So the wealth management arm of the business is particularly interesting to me. Mm-hmm. Certainly I've come to know Laird Norton because of this incredibly highly regarded national wealth management business. Mm-hmm. How has that evolved over time from, I imagine, a single family office into this multifamily office, and what role does it play in the family and in the company?
So it started out as you said, single family office. Started out in the 1960s as Laird Norton Trust Company, but really only taking care of the Laird Norton family. Then started taking third party clients in the late 70s. And the whole idea was, well, if we can do this for our family, can we do it for other families and treat them like they're part of our family? And so really it's really grown from there. And today in Laird Norton Wealth Management, I would say about 20% of the assets under management are family assets. And it's about the whole idea. It's about services. It's and why people come to us is they know that we're going to treat them like we would treat our family members, right? There is no distinction between a client. We treat them all like their family, and it plays a role. It plays a role within the family because we can working with the wealth management, the Laird Norton Company and Laird Norton Wealth Management, because we're two separate entities. We can work through sometimes the sticky issues that you get into when it comes to unit transfers and those types of things. Mm-hmm. But we treat it like any other business. It has its own board of directors. I'm on the board, and we're trying to maximize its value there and attract new clients and build the business to where it is the preeminent Northwest wealth management firm.
Well, I think it is. So congratulations.
We got to take it even further.
So you've been very open. You know exactly when you'll retire. So what does the succession plan at Laird Norton look like? How are you working through that? What sort of advice will you give to your successor when he or she is named? So we started talking about this a couple of years ago because we were kind of putting our vision for the next decade in place. And so one of the key issues, we really believe in best-of-class governance and really thinking through transition plans really well. And so the board and I started talking about what's going to be my eventual retirement date and what would make sense for the company versus other transitions that we were having going on. So we went through that, laid it up about what we were trying to accomplish from a business and family standpoint. So we're going through a process any company would go through. We're looking at our internal candidate options. We have at least one strong candidate that is being very carefully assessed and developed. We're also starting to think about making sure what is the right job description for the CEO of this family enterprise going longer term, not just what it is today. And then is there somebody on the outside that maybe be able to lead it even better? So we're going through that. That'll be we have a timeline with milestones, very specific things I need to do, what the board's doing, really kind of over the next 2 years so we can kind of make a decision within the right period of time to make a smooth transition. My advice to whoever sits in my chair, she or he, my advice to that person will be
make sure you're not part of the last chapter written.
That's
Yeah, because you're part of a legacy. You don't want to be, this is how I look at it. I'm part of a legacy, right? A very proud legacy. I take that very personally. And you got, to the person in my chair, you're going to have to be thinking about how do you remain financially relevant, emotionally relevant to this group of family members that you can extend into 2050.
So soon you'll have your opportunities to ask Jeff some questions. So hopefully you've already thought of some great ones. I think before we get there, though, we'd all love to hear about another experience that you currently have as the lead independent director at J.M. Huber.
Mm-hmm.
So what's it like? J.M. Huber's sixth generation family business?
Yeah, it's in the very beginning of sixth. It's kind of in, when you think of leadership, it's in its fourth and fifth generation from a leadership standpoint.
So will you tell us a little bit about J.M. Huber and the role you play as the lead director?
I'm actually the chair of the board.
In your free time?
In my free time. And that's where I have great support among the Laird Norton board. They felt that it was, from my own development and company's development, it was good for me to be sitting on another board or two to not only share our experiences and my thoughts on things, but also for me to bring back other ideas and thoughts from other family businesses. So they've been very supportive of me doing this. And the reason I became chair of the J.M. Huber board, I was on it for a relatively short period of time, and they were going through some leadership transition. We were also going to be going through our own CEO transition there. They wanted somebody who could bring family and business together. That's why I was put into that position, because we had a lot of public company board members, former CEOs, on the board. And it's that, but again, at the end of the day, it's about family and business. And so how do you bring those together? How do you think through the liquidity issues? How do you think through how do we grow this business and the values that need to be instilled in it and for the long term? And so that's how I got involved. And so that's how I got into being into the kind of the lead position on the board.
So I'm sure there's some different, there's different secret sauce there at J.M. Huber as compared to Laird Norton and
Very
Kohler.
different.
Can you give us some examples of what's led to that company's great longevity and success?
I think one of the key things for the J.M. Huber family is this sense that their values truly matter within the sense of the company, that being a family business truly provides a strategic difference in their business's ability to think long term and focus on sustainability, employee welfare, all those things, that there's something special being built by being part of this J.M. Huber family enterprise. So I really think it's that installation of their values deep within the organization that really is their secret sauce.
Can you give us some examples of how that plays out?
Well, it's very much like what David was saying. It's being very clear on doing your social impact report. How much water, how much more efficient are we in use of energy and water in our plants? What's our employee safety records? Are we continually improve? What's the level of diversity that we have within our management team? It's all those things, right? As a board, we have board goals and working with management, and one of them is around diversity and inclusion. It's because we know not only is it the right thing to do, but we know to be competitive long-term, diversity and inclusion, making sure those voices are heard within the various meeting rooms is absolutely critical.
Thank you. So we've got a few years left. What's your biggest challenge in these next several years as you move on from not J.M. Huber, but Laird Norton?
I think two things. We have a variety of different transitions. There's a few other people who have gray hair like me that also can be transitioning within the company. It's making sure we get our leadership team absolutely right. Making sure that we really get the family prepared for that change. Because it will cause some people who maybe haven't been vocal in the minority all of a sudden say, well, should we be doing something totally different? right? And so this is going to be about really clear communications, leadership, and then for me, as I'm trying to figure out how to carve out more time on helping work with the family about the intangible connections. How do we do more on the intangible side? So again, it's a combination. I mean, I want them to invite me back to our 175th anniversary is in 2030, and I told them I want to be invited back for that, but I want to be able to come to that the 175th anniversary event and actually see a company that has a chance to be out to 2050.
Amazing. Well, so what do you all think? What questions do you have for Jeff? In back, we have someone in the.
Yeah, so I was just wondering if you would be willing to follow up on the issue that you raised about the role of philanthropy in amongst this business and this family. Philanthropy can be so highly individualized. How do you develop a collective sense of how to be effective philanthropically?
Yeah, I totally understand it, because like I said, before really until 2006, when we kind of did some of our other reorganizations that were going on within the company at that time, it was very basically individual family driven. And so individual family members or individual branches of the family were doing great things. But we're really trying to think about how can we do this as a collective whole. So we actually had and I wasn't involved in it, there are other family members leading this. We actually had a family conference over a 3-day period and really trying to think about what are those areas that we can unite around, right? What focus areas that we can unite around that would really be a thing that would bring the family together and be a sense of the glue, right? And then how do we then, within those various, and there's 4 focus areas, right? And then how do we bring family members who are really passionate about that focus area or this focus area together and actually feel like they're making a difference with a collective oversight of that as a group? And then starting to think more about how we interact with our company more, the enterprise more. And it's evolved, right? It started off with this focus, and we've actually found out one focus area really was just really being back to being led by 2 or 3 people and really wasn't something that the collective family could get behind. And so we've evolved that. And so we replaced that. And so it's having the sense that the philanthropy is a unifying factor within the family, and that, yeah, there's going to be different things, but what are the things we can, as a group, can kind of agree on and are not going to cause us to splinter, right? Because there are some philanthropic causes that can be a lightning rod within a family. And so you kind of, if you really want to go do a lightning rod event, maybe really we'll go do that off to the side, but we try to find those collective things as far as social services or watersheds or whatever that the family can wrap its head around. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
What other questions do you have? I'm sure some of you have questions for Jeff. Over here.
I'm curious as to the financial relevance of the company to 500 shareholders and the potential for that to be a drain on the ability to invest in the future.
Yeah, it is, but I think that's why we have a different model than, let's say, the Kohler company, from the standpoint that as they've exited family, kind of restructured the company, and family members who kind of left, and they're kind of back to almost being a second generation family company, as David said, is we've had various liquidity events over that period of time. So they're not as dependent. I don't think there's anybody in today within the family. Now, we're significant to their portfolio, maybe in their net worth. I don't think there's anybody in the family today that is dependent on what they're receiving from the company on an annual basis. So there is that. So we then, we have some period of times where you have to think in 2005, we made a big decision to sell our largest business. It was $3 billion in sales, had 10,000 employees, but for a variety of reasons, what was best for the business, where we saw the economy at that time, and what the family needed, we made a decision to exit. We did it in a way we felt it was to the right party, and we're very happy we did that because we went through the recession next, and so the business survived through that. But we then distributed a lot of that money out to the family. Okay, that gave them their independence, and then we communicated with the family what we were going to do next and how we were going to rebuild over time, and we were going to build it from here. And so again, that's happened happened in in 1900 when we kind of closed up shop and things got reorganized. It happened through the Weyerhaeuser and Boise Cascade going public, and they were held in trust, to the recent liquidity event in 2006. So we've handled it differently, but I would say there's nobody today financially it maybe makes a difference in their life, but they're not financially dependent on it.
Thanks, Steve, for the question. Todd.
What happens at the annual family summit, and how does the company contribute to funding that summit?
The company funds it. So the company I know some families struggle with that, and they want people to have skin in the game, but we really want, when you get to this number, we want everybody to come. And people's financial net worth is different within the family when you get to this large of a group and how they've managed their money over time, stuff like that. So we pay for their flights out, and we pay for their everything while they're there. It's not, we don't go over the top, but it's a nice event, and we're in nice places. We were in Chicago, downtown Chicago last year. Been to Hawaii. We'll be in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho this coming year. But
or how about St. Louis?
Not big enough for 500 people. St. Louis, maybe.
We've got a good aquarium, another Ferris wheel.
But so we believe that's one of our best investments in shareholder relations that we can make, is getting people together and actually understanding the business and actually caring about their other family members. So we do not want to do anything that's going to be an impediment to somebody actually being there. So that's why we pay for it. And then people fly in typically in on a Wednesday. They get together with their individual family members. It's they usually having dinner with the individuals, and then the formal groups start on Thursday. That's when the foundations will meet. They'll have their conversations. There might be other educational things going on, and then we'll have our kickoff family dinner on Thursday night, and we're kind of then into the full swing of things. Friday, it's usually allows for some recreation or something fun in the location we're in, and then I do a 3.5 hour business overview, right, with our various businesses, what we're doing, where we're going, the lessons learned. I do a CEO forum. The next day, we have our annual meeting where we actually vote on the directors, go through all the things, the financials of the company, go through what the family issues are, have a kind of a mock board meeting in the afternoon. That's when I also do the CEO forum. And we also do all this time Camp 3 Trees going on with the kids. And we typically the family typically has at least one kind of community service project they're doing together. They're out they'll go into the city and they'll actually get together and do a community service project together to try to bring people around that. They have a family forum where they kind of get their gripes out on Sunday morning, and
at the end of the summit.
At the end of the summit, how did the summit go? What are we not liking? And then by Sunday afternoon, they're going home.
Jeff's got to catch a plane to Seattle soon, but we have time for maybe one or two more questions. Anybody have in the back?
Follow up with last. The family console and the family conference and your camp and all these things. What percentage of your earnings do you spend on? And is it all family members or only shareholder family members?
All family members. Because remember, we've kept everything within the family with the buy-sell, so there really aren't, today, you are typically either there might be a few stepchildren, but you're either a lineal descendant or married in, or somebody of that matter. I would say what we're spending on family-related things, it's a good question. Thinking about maybe 5%. Not even that, probably more in the 3.5 range.
Any more? Okay, well, thank you all for participating. And Jeff, thank you so much.
Thank you.